Dear colleagues, good evening. Nice to meet you. Once again, I want to ask to our technical service, is everything sound and presentation? Please write in chat, is everything good?
Hi, good afternoon, Andrei.
Okay, nice
Good
to meet
afternoon,
you.
all. I don't know if anyone is online yet.
I will check just a moment. 1, 2, 3,
Okay,
4,
perfect.
5, 6%.
Perfect. Okay, perfect. Before we start, I just want to say that you sent yesterday the recorded presentation of Wednesday. And you also sent us the link for tomorrow. So whoever has not received it, please let me know so that I send it again. That's what I wanted to say. So Trey, I give the floor to you.
Thank you very much, Harry. Thank you. Nice to see you. Nice to see you. I understand that today is Friday evening, and maybe somebody have different arrangements and accommodations and so. But nevertheless, if somebody is absent, everybody will have possibility to receive link which allow to everybody to see lecture in recording. So I think that everything is okay. And today is the second lecture of our series of webinars, and the topic of this lecture, of the seminar, of this webinar is assessment of the functional status as the main goal of modern anti-aging medicine. I should say that before we shall start the discussion, I want to notice that it is necessary to know the principle. The principle, to understand the principle, why just functional assessment is the basis of anti-aging medicine, and the beginning of this theory is from international classification of the disease. Since this year, we have the new variant of this classification. The previous one was active for 5 years, and now World Health Organization gives to all countries possibility to introduce their new classification. It's 11th variant of classification of international disease classification, and the period of transition is 5 years. So for 5 years, all countries must introduce this new classification of the diseases. And around this classification, there were many discussions because the first proposal was to introduce to this classification aging. But maybe it is a very ageist position because aging is not a pathological process. It is a normal human property, a normal period of human life. Of course, as we discussed at the previous lecture, age is a risk factor for many diseases, in some cases etiology, so the main reason of the disease, but nevertheless, aging is not a disease. And if we will think that aging is a disease, it means the ageism. Ageism is discrimination toward elders, which was expressed especially during pandemic of COVID. And I should say that according to the report of World Health Organization, every second person around the world has discriminatory views towards older people. So that's why World Health Organization decided to introduce to new classification of the disease the new term, which is called intrinsic capacity. We discussed this term during the previous lecture, but nevertheless, I will repeat because it is necessary to understand this principle to make proper assessment of aging in every person. So I will remind you firstly that intrinsic capacity is the substrate, is something which we can touch to understand whether aging is successful or not so successful. And we can determine the successful of aging on some main domains. So domain is the characteristic of health status, which describes us the status in different kinds of functioning of a human being. There are a few domains. The first domain is cognitive domain. It's memory, self-control, orientation, ability to learn new skills. The second domain is the motor or locomotor domain, is the balance, gait, muscle mass, and strength. Domain number 3 is psychological domain. This is mood, emotional background. Number 4, sensory domain, vision, hearing, smell, and touch. Number 5, somatic domain, cardiorespiratory problems, hormonal status, polypragmasia, how much drugs and medications every person introduce. And number 6 is vitality. Vitality is a special domain which is characterized the nutrition of the human. So the assessment of functional status we make according to these 6 domains. It is necessary to understand, if we are discussing the problems of anti-aging medicine, it is necessary to understand how this man or woman aging according to these 6 main domains. I think that this message is clear. And let us discuss some changes of human being according to these main domains. And domain number 1 is vitality, and every person during aging have their special disease or special condition of health, which is called age-related anorexia. This is very new term, very new disease, which is now under study, and it's a pity, but in all world specialists discuss how can we prevent this age-related anorexia. Anorexia means it's a special medical term, which means the absence of appetite. Maybe you see from everyday life that when men are aged, it has a problem with decreased appetite. With the decreased appetite. So age-related anorexia is the decreased appetite or food intake in elderly. It's a special syndrome, and in anti-aging medicine we put a great attention to prevent this specific stage of health or of organism, because it leads to the syndrome of malnutrition, which leads to sharp weight loss, and it is necessary to make the screening of appetite and food intake to prevent this malnutrition. I should say that this stage, age-related anorexia is rather widespread. Approximately 30% among elderly people lives in communities have this problem, have this condition of health, especially women. And of course, it's a great problem, especially for people which live alone, and is associated with many negative consequences, including weight loss and weakness, sarcopenia, decreased physical and cognitive function, malnutrition, decreased bone mass, micronutrient deficiency, and so on. So during all life cycle, especially in the second half of life, we must understand the ability to have good appetite to prevent their age-related anorexia. And this why this problem is very interesting, because it's rather rare condition when age is the main reason of this disease, because young people, they have not such problem, and they have usually good appetite. But in the second half of life, appetite decreased due to the changes in body, due to the changes in body physiology and anatomy. For example, we have the problem of stimulation and suppression of appetite by hypothalamus, is a special structure of brain. With age, we have a violation of the regulation of peripheral hormonal release. We have changes in different molecules. I will don't know to discuss this problem in details, because maybe it is not so interesting for doctors, but believe me, and to see to this slide, to this text on this slide, that with age we have a different changes in hormonal exchange in physiology of human body, which lead in complex to decrease of appetite. In clinic, we see the violation of appetite regulation, hormonal disorders, physiological changes with age. We have also we see in people who have decrease of appetite concomitant diseases, including neurodegenerative diseases, medications. We see the influence of social factors such as loneliness, poverty, reduced access of food, and so on. And how can we understand the status of appetite? Is it good or it is bad? In modern anti-aging medicine, the main diagnostic principle is the usage of questionnaires and special scales, which can help us to measure this or those function. So we can measure also appetite, and there is a very famous and very popular now in clinical practice so-called show appetite questionnaire, SNAQ, which can help us to define and to objectivize and to define and to measure appetite. It can be very bad, average, good, and very good. Good taste sensations, almost absent, bad, average, good, or very good. To define when a person eats food, I eat a few spoonfuls. I am full after eating the third part of the usual portion for everyone. A half a portion after almost all portions. I am rarely full. It is necessary to define if a person usually eats a snack than necessary, 1 dish, 2 dishes, 3 dishes, more than 3 dishes, and according to this position, we can measure the risk of decrease of appetite and the risk of malnutrition. Malnutrition is weight loss, is the decreasement of immunity, and many other consequences. So this is example of how can we estimate functional status of vitality, and example that this domain vitality is damaged by the new condition, which is widespread with aging. It's age-related anorexia, and example of usage of the first questionnaire in our today's lecture, short appetite questionnaire, which can be used to define this condition. I should say that elders, I told you this at the previous lecture, that elders, people in the second half of life, they have a large demand of peptides because they have a lack of proteins in which comes from food and which consumed from with food. So usually we in this situation when we have a risk of malnutrition, and when we decrease when we understand the presence of decreasement of appetite, we can use peptides to give to human being, to human organism, some proteins to avoid malnutrition. So this is very important. We will have lecture number 4 about peptides. It will be just about peptides, and but I want you to understand the principle. When we have decreasement of appetite, we must introduce some protein to human being, because man or woman have increasement of demand of proteins, and the best source of proteins just peptides. Because, and also another positive side of this question, peptides, we use peptides, and usually they are not used alone. They use with vitamins, they use with macro elements. So in the end of this part of lecture, I will remind you once again that vitality or nutrition is one of the most important domains of assessment of functional status, and we must understand the level of appetite. If it is bad, especially in the second half of life, we must understand that this person have a high risk of malnutrition, and we must treat him. We must introduce proteins, and the source of these proteins are peptides with vitamins and with macro elements. Another important domain is cognitive domain. Now we have a new term too, cognitive continuum. Of course, if you will ask to everybody, what do you friend more in the second part of life, maybe you will see at the previous times, long years ago, we hear that somebody afraid cancer, but now we have good technologies of treatment of cancer and technologies of early revealing of cancer. But now human lives just longer than everywhere, in every time, and we have increasing of level of diseases of this second part of life due to the increasing of length of life. And one of such diseases is Alzheimer's disease. This disease is very interesting because we usually see, when we see clinical manifestation of this disease, dementia. When we have problems, when a person have problems with deterioration of cognitive, behavioral, or functional abilities, when a person have serious deep problems with memory, with behavior, with functionality, it means, you see, as in this slide, you can see in this text, is the thought, the last part of the disease. But this disease started with the preclinical stage. It means that in the brain there are the deposits of tau protein. It's a special pathological protein which disconnect nervous cells and disconnect nervous impulse, which came from one cell to another, from another to thought, from thought to fourth, and so on. But when the number of this tau protein is not so high, the impulse between nervous cells, it can build another way. That's why there are no large changes in cognition, in behavioral functioning of a person or functionality. It's the preclinical stage. And I should say that the length of this preclinical stage is very large. Is very large and long. It approximately from 15 to 25 years. So in the brain of human being, of person, can be many tau proteins, but clinically this person is healthy. The second period of Alzheimer's disease is a so-called moderate cognitive impairment, when a person demonstrates some impairments in cognition, the lost memory, maybe depression, maybe anxiety, maybe some decreasing of functionality, but nevertheless, these changes are not very large, and they allow for a person to live separately without any care. So, and the third state is dementia. So we must understand from this to understand these problems with the cognitive domain, that cognitive continuum is so that if person have Alzheimer's disease, it doesn't start with dementia. It starts very, very, very early, maybe 5, 10, 20, or even 25 years earlier. But today we have not screening methods. Screening is very simple tests which can give to doctor information has this person disease or doesn't have. We have not such screening, such simple methods of diagnosing of cognitive impairment of Alzheimer's disease. We have special laboratory methods, but they are very hard to perform to everybody. For example, we must go inside lumbar column. Of course, it is understandable that it is not possible to use these methods very widely, because it is rather complex, it is rather difficult. So we must introduce in this situation, we must understand the risk factors for dementia, and we must work with these risk factors to prevent this situation. And risk factors for dementia are different throughout the life cycle. In young age, under 45 years, the prevention of dementia is to have good education and training new skills. In average age from 45 to 65 years, to treat arterial hypertension, obesity, hearing loss, repeated traumatic brain injuries, and alcohol abuse. In late age, 65 years plus, to struggle with smoking, depression, physical inactivity, social isolation, diabetes mellitus, and air pollution. So it is better to understand that to prevent changes in cognitive decline, we must work in every age with these risk factors to prevent dementia. And if to say more concrete in the if to work with the concrete person, the prevention of dementia is the following. Firstly, we must measure arterial pressure in everybody, and if these or those persons have arterial hypertension, it's increasing of blood pressure, we must give special medication which allow us to decrease systolic blood level less than 130 millimeters in middle age. So it is necessary to control blood pressure and to use everyday proper medication for decreasing of blood pressure, especially systolic blood pressure. Then we must understand that our brain, when it is active, when it is in training, it works better as muscle. When we go to gym, we active training, we have active training, physical training. That's why our muscles are growing. So we must give to our brain possibility to work. And what does it mean? We must understand that information which come from brain, it come from eyes. So that's why we need to give to our client or patient good glasses. We must understand that very much information comes from here, and that's why we must measure hearing loss and help to the person to adapt to hearing aids, because many people think that these special hearings are unacceptable, very difficult to use or ineffective, but really they can prevent dementia and cognitive decline. Of course, we must decrease alcohol intake. We must prevent head injuries, especially for people of high occupational risk, for military men, for footballists, for some representatives of some kind of sports with head injuries. Of course, it is necessary to decrease smoking, regardless of age, in every age. We must normalize body mass index. We must prevent obesity and diabetes mellitus through a healthy diet and physical activity. And of course, we must maintain the level of physical activity in the middle and what is most important in later life. So to measure cognitive domain, it means, of course, measurement of level of cognitive functioning, but also measurement of these things which we are discussing now. So to measure arterial pressure, to measure hearing possibilities, to measure nutrition of person, level of alcohol intake, to measure some habits, maybe professional habits such as head injuries, to understand is it smoker or non-smoker, to measure body mass index. So our memory and our cognitive function and our cognitive decline, they depends upon these somatic things. And to prevent cognitive decline and to make cognitive health better, we must make our body better. Another important thing in the domain, in domains of aging is locomotor domain. And I want to tell you a few words about new disease which is called sarcopenia. Sarcopenia is a special syndrome which is characterized by progressive loss of muscle mass and strength. Of course, usually we see the primary sarcopenia is a sarcopenia of elders in age 65 plus. But nevertheless, in many cases, we see the so-called secondary sarcopenia. Secondary sarcopenia is a disease when somebody have another diseases. For example, oncological pathology, chronic renal failure, group of chronic obstructive pulmonary disease, chronic heart failure, when these organs, failed organs, they produce special molecules which goes to muscles and decrease their mass and strength. This is secondary sarcopenia. It can be acute. For example, when person developed sarcopenia in 6 months, usually it's, for example, stroke or trauma or fracture and so on. And chronic sarcopenia, this is a stage of health which developed often with age. And we have a few stages of this sarcopenia. It's so-called cratopenia, the very first signs of muscle weak. Dynapenia, when muscles begins weak, but muscle mass is in the range of norm. And sarcopenia, it's the summary of muscle weak and of muscle loss. Sarcopenia is significant comorbid pathology, as we say, because it is accompanied by many changes in bones, osteoporosis, which gives increased risk of falls and fractures, age-related hormonal declines. We see it's in men and in women, in postmenopause and in age-related androgen deficiency. We see sarcopenia in the situation of chronic kidney disease, And of course, it seriously, significantly reduced activity in everyday life. And this is now sarcopenia is a very important prognostic factor. When we see sarcopenia, even dynapenia, decreasing of muscle strength, it's a negative sign which can give us information that this person have a higher risk of mortality rate or of invalidization. So sarcopenia is very bad because it means increased mortality, increased acute functional deficiency in elders, falls, fractures, and increased needs for inpatient care. And I should say, what is a problem? A problem is so that till now we have a discussion whether sarcopenia is disease or it is normal sign of aging. If it is disease, we must produce some medications, some drugs for treatment. It's another money. If it is usual sign of aging, it means that we must introduce physical activity and proper nutrition and some supplements, such as peptides. But till now, I should say that specialists think that this is a special disease, a special health condition, and now there are in progress some studies which allow in future give some medication to treat this sarcopenia, but these studies are in progress. They are not finished, and but there are some candidates among some groups of medications to treat sarcopenia. For example, selective androgen receptor agonists, ghrelin agonists, antibodies to myostatin, and so on. Maybe it is very difficult, but you must understand that now there are 2 points of treatment, of care of people with sarcopenia: physical activity and proper nutrition. In this slide, you see the risk factors of sarcopenia. It increased with age, with poor nutrition. Remember, age-related anorexia, prolonged immobilization. For example, when somebody has a fracture, we put special immobilization when muscles are inactive. So it's a good reason to introduce peptides to this person to give more proteins to muscles. Type 2 diabetes mellitus, obesity, cognitive decline, deficiency of vitamins, and some behavioral factors such as increased alcohol consumption and smoking. In this slide, you see the reasons why sarcopenia develops due to the factors, as I told you: elementary, poor nutrition, and some changes in human physiology due to poor nutrition, such as increasing of special hormone, which is called leptin, hyperleptinemia, due to decreased level of physical activity, due to hormonal changes, and many other factors. So believe me that this condition is really disease. And of course, we must do something. We must diagnose this condition, this disease. And but a problem is so that sarcopenia till now is absent in international classification of disease. That's why health coaches community is the first helpers for physicians to estimate the status of locomotor domain and to reveal sarcopenia and to do something to help this person. Why sarcopenia develops? You see, if we will say to such young man to go to gym, he will very soon have these very beautiful muscles. But in elders, it is not possible in the second half of life, because as we discussed at the previous lecture, these persons in the second half of life, they have not so good developed stem cells, and they have a deficit of reserve of the stem cells, and they can't create such beautiful muscle mass. So this is one more reason why sarcopenia develops. It is mitochondrial pathology. Mitochondria, as you know, are the part of every cells, and age-related changes in muscle tissue are associated with the decrease in the regulatory activity of mitochondria. Mitochondria as electric station of the cell, which give necessary energy to cell, and one of the ways of improvement of work of mitochondria is also to give some peptides as a fuel to mitochondria. And to understand that sarcopenia is rather difficult condition, it's widespread, but nevertheless it is really disease. You see that the picture of muscles in the persons with sarcopenia, such as in the light stages in poliomyelitis. So we see very many different changes, such as atrophy of muscle cells, the decreasing of number of special neuromuscular units, which give to muscle the possibility to move. So this is really disease which is accompanied with muscle weakness, with the impairment of the motor skills, the decreasement of volume of daily activity, the decreasement of appetite, osteoporosis, reduced walking speed, and so on. But it's a problem number one. How can we measure the presence of sarcopenia? How can we guess, is this person is sarcopenic or he is normal? The first stage of diagnosis of sarcopenia, which can do everybody, is the screening of this condition, because we must see everyday life of the person, and if you will see that somebody have falls or has a problems with climbing the stairs, not because of high blood pressure or of heart beating or other reasons, but because of weakness in muscles. Problems to walk when somebody needs assistance in walking. Problems to lift and carry some usual things. So it means that maybe this person has sarcopenia. Another stage of diagnosis is to measure muscle strength. Usually we do with a special dynamometer, and if the muscle strength is less than 16 kilograms for women and less than 27 kilograms for men, grip strength, it means that this person have decreased muscle activity, and it is dynapenia, muscle weakness. And number three, the step number three, is to define the decreasement of muscle mass. Usually we do it by special methods, for example, proton X-ray absorptiometry, but this method is very difficult. It can be used bioimpedance, and some simple formulas, for example, to measure the circumference of the arm, minus 3.14 the thickness of the musculoskeletal fold of the triceps in the field of triceps, and we have the significant meaning less than 25 centimeters for men and 19 centimeters for women. It means that this person has a small low mass of muscles. But the golden standard in everyday practice, including clinics of anti-aging medicine, is bioimpedance equipment, which can allow us to see the body composition and to understand the presence of decreasement of muscle mass. There are some laboratory methods of diagnosing of sarcopenia, but they are in the progress. They study now. I can say only that sarcopenia is really associated with anemia. It's a low hemoglobin level, but it is not usual. It is not, as we say, pathognomonic feature. It may be present or no present, and different laboratory tests are discussed now, but proper laboratory diagnosis till now is absent. So we use the functional methods of revealing of sarcopenia and instrumental methods. So I will repeat once again. It must know everybody, every health coach in community, that we have a definite diagnostic algorithm of sarcopenia. The first is to observe everyday life of men. We must introduce a SARC-F screening questionnaire. Then we must determine the muscle strength to determine dynapenia by DRIPS strength dynamometry. Step number three is the determination of muscle mass, usually with the help of bioimpedance metry, which allow us to understand the composition of the body. And step number four is a special questionnaires which can give us information about decreasement of quality of life in persons with sarcopenia. Most popular and easy in use questionnaire is SAQUL, Sarcopenia and Quality of Life questionnaire, which allow us to build targeted rehabilitation programs. There are 22 questions in this questionnaire. So the first one: do you feel your age? In normal conditions, man can't feel his age. It is necessary to be agelessness. If yes, what exactly makes you pay attention to it? Do you have a feeling of physical weakness? Do you have a feeling of limitation in physical activity? Do you feel tight when walking? Do you have problems with balance? Do you fall often? Do you think your appearance has changed? If yes, then why? If yes, to what extent? Do you have feeling of weakness and vulnerability? Do you currently have difficulties in your daily life? Does muscle weakness limit your movements? If yes, then what is exactly in what way? Does muscle weakness limit your sex life? How has your physical activity level changed? How has the level of your household activity changed? So these are very simple questions. If you want, you can go to the special internet site. And what is the positive sides of this questionnaire? You can define the locuses of life which are damaged by sarcopenia, and on this based to build the programs of physical training to the person to increase the level of muscle activity and of muscle mass. But sarcopenia is not only physical activity, but also some additional supplements, including peptides and essential amino acids, which allows to stimulate muscle production of own proteins and inhibit their degradation. We see the positive relationship between the use of proteins and essential amino acids with muscle strength and volume. And of course, such agents are of great importance, especially in the age and after 65 years, because it is necessary to maintain normal muscle metabolism, to give much more proteins to the human body, 1.2 gram per kilogram of body weight, according to the studies PROT-Age and ASPEN, which allow to muscles to regenerate themselves and to maintain good level of mass and strength. And also, of course, peptides and essential amino acids, their biological meaning of nutritional support, that they are metabolized to short-chain fatty acids, propionate, butyrate, and acetate, which stimulate anabolism of muscles. Anabolism is possibility to regenerate themselves, and they have anti-inflammatory effects, which is of great importance to the prevention of progression of sarcopenia and prevention sarcopenia at all as a disease and of stage of the disease. Especially we use leucocin 3 grams, which is it's an essential amino acids, which is a component of sport nutrition in many cases, and this essential amino acid is of great useful for sarcopenia, for prevention of sarcopenia. Leucin as a special amino acids, essential, which comes from the products of natural origin, but not synthesized in the body. And sources of this amino acid is beans, soy, brown rice, egg white, meat, and it has very many positive influences to the health status, because reduces the levels of glucose, provide the nitrogen balance which is necessary for the process of protein and carbohydrate metabolism, prevent the appearance of weakness, sarcopenia, asthenia, as we say. Immunomodulator participates in wound healing and have very strong anabolic or regeneration effects on muscles. Also, for treatment of sarcopenia can be used beta-hydroxybeta-methylbutyrate is a supplement too. It's a metabolite of leucin. It means that this beta-hydroxybeta-methylbutyrate originated from leucin. It has very many good positive influences. Activate muscle metabolism. Metabolism is exchanged of substances in muscle. It stimulates the growth hormone. It participates in regulation of activities of many special and necessary for health muscles hormones and ferments, and regulates oxidation. So it is very useful, and beta-hydroxybeta-methylbutyrate is used in the sports nutrition system and can be really useful for treatment of sarcopenia. By the way, for treatment of sarcopenia is good ursolic acid. Ursolic acid, it situates in large amount in green tea, and also in leaves and fruits of blueberries, for example, cranberries, in rhododendron, and so on. In green tea, it activates the key anabolic hormones which are responsible for muscle growth, and sometimes we recommend to our patients to consume green tea or special teas on the base of blueberries and cranberries for treatment of sarcopenia. Of course, I'm very far from idea that to drink green tea will treat somebody from sarcopenia, but nevertheless in complex it can be really useful. And of course, in treatment of this disease, we recommend products which enriched with nitrates, such as spinach, leek, cabbage, broccoli, carrot, pumpkin, cucumber, and so on, because these enriched nitrates products, they stimulate the formation of a special molecule, endogenous inorganic nitrate, which increased their perfusion of muscles, increased the number of blood by the activation of vessels. They became thicker and much more blood pumped through muscles and give muscles more blood, more substances, more energy. So these products are useful for treatment of sarcopenia. Another domain which is of great importance but rarely discussed, that's why I decided to tell you some words about this problem, which is really of great importance, is the sense of smell. Sense of smell and anosmia is fully absence of smell. It's the sign of the problems in sensory domain of intrinsic capacity. I should say that after 70 years, especially, many people have decreased sense of smell. It is called in scientific world presbyosmia. It is not preventable, but it is possible to reduce the severity of this thing. The decreased, why it occurs? Because the decreasement of density of nerve endings and decreased mucus production in the nose, in nasal passages, it develops gradually. It increased especially in people with polypragmasia, polypharmacia, when somebody introduced many drugs. And in smokers, often we see it in nose polyposis. It's the absence of smell often are the first signs of Alzheimer's and Parkinson's disease. And of course, it must be must put attention to this problem, because it is necessary to diagnose with some dangerous pathological conditions, for example, with malignant neoplasm of the brain, cancer of brain. Why this problem is of great importance? Because it's a problem of security. A smell, our nose, is a detection of very important information. For example, when we eat some food, it can be very good looked, but with absence of smell can't avoid us that this food is bad. It may be a signal of propensity. That's why when we eat such food, we can have food toxic infection. The decreasement of smell leads to decrease of appetite. And we discussed this problem, which is the reason of the development of malnutrition syndrome. Then some people, they say, especially after 70 years, they say that I don't feel the smell of this food. Maybe it is not good. I don't want to eat it. So it is necessary to give some special smell supplements to increase the attractivity of food. And the low level of attractivity of food because of decreasement of smells is the reason why people often use many sweets or many salt, which is dangerous for health because of increasing of obesity, because of appearance of arterial hypertension, and so on. And of course, the decreased sense of smell, it means the reduction of alarm due to, for example, smoke, due to gas, the presence of toxic chemicals, and it means increased risk of depression, because sense of smell is associated with the amygdala. It's a special part of brain which regulates also emotions. that's why people who have the decreasement of smell have a high level of depression and of bad mood. And I should say that we use widely the so-called stimulation therapy for anosmia, twice a day aromatherapy sessions with 4 flavors for 16 weeks with rose, eucalyptus, lemon, and carnation. And we have really significant improvement of the sense of smell after infectious disease. And we have a really widespreading of this anosmia during a pandemic of COVID. The decreasement of feeling of smell was one of clinical features of COVID. And usually, often we have the decreasement of feel of smell after brain injuries. We have when using stimulation therapy, we have an increasement of feel of smell after brain injury. And last domain, psychological domain. We can measure this domain too, and as in many other domains, we used questionnaires and scales. For example, we can use a special Covey scale to measure anxiety. We must analyze complaints of a person. Maybe he is nervous or she trembling, agitation, fears, behavior, fright, worried, and so on, and to estimate the so-called vegetative symptoms of anxiety. In our body, we have the so-called vegetation nervous system, which during anxiety became activated, and a person can have a tremor. It means this one increased sweating, hot flashes, restless sleep, discomfort in the epigastric, it is here, epigastric region. And usually it is felt by the doctor, but it can be felt by the health coach, and answer options from 0, absence of symptom, to 4, the symptoms are very pronounced. And this scale, it is very simple, can measure and can estimate the presence, and can measure anxiety and different degrees of anxiety. And another clinical conditions, which is they usually goes together, is depression. And there are many scales and questionnaires to measure depression too, but we use so-called Montgomery-Åsberg scale for depression assessment. It is necessary to understand whether this person have the deterioration of sleep, the presence of depression. And if you will reveal in these or other ways the presence of symptoms of anxiety or depression, you must recommend to your client to go to the physician or to psychologist to put proper diagnosis and to understand what is the reason. But nevertheless, it is necessary to know about such problems, because it's the so-called psychological domain of intrinsic capacity, and you must have in functional assessment, you must have full picture of the status. And the last domain is somatic domain. Of course, somatic domain is our body. It's all problems with can occur in our body and can be in our body, and only a few simple numbers. As I like to say, 400 by 15 is a level, disabling level of decreasement of motor activity when somebody can't make a distance of 400 meters in 15 minutes, and or for example get up and go test. There are age differences in where it means that we discussed this text where we must recommend to a person to sit to the chair, then to stand up, to make three steps forward, then return to chair, and up to 79 years norm of fulfillment of this exercise if is 14 seconds, and in 40 years and older 16 seconds. But somatic domain, it is not for health coach, it is for physician. But nevertheless, you must understand that you can observe, you can see everyday life of this other person, and you can't measure, because measurement of somatic domain is a clinical diagnosis. But you must understand that measuring and estimation of cognitive domain, of sensitive domain, of mood, or the revealing of presence of anxiety and depression is of great importance, and you can inform your client about presence of problems, and you can give him a proper direction to go to doctor to make to increase or to make more high quality nutrition or physical activity, or to use some supplements as peptides. It's Salvador Dali, clocks. So I wish you have a proper clocks of your life, and thank you for the attention. So this is the end of our information and of our lecture. Maybe you have any questions. I will be very glad to answer. As far as I understand, during previous lecture, I answered to all questions during webinar, and because there were no any questions on your mail, it's very good, and today we have time also as usual, and I will be glad to answer to your questions. And maybe I must say you that tomorrow will be my lecture 2. It will be dedicated to the problem of nutrition and physical activity plan. And in Sunday, it will be lecture of our peptidologist, a specialist in peptides, Elena Korshun. She will tell you about peptides, how to use peptides in different. It's a question: can we use peptides in order to improve motor control or communication skills, mostly to disabled people or dementia cases? If not, what's your suggestion for this group of people? Also, we often see cases of athletes with tendon injuries struggling to return to their sports due to the lack of the blood circulation in tendons, less nutrients and oxygen intercourse. Can peptides help in these cases? Thank you very much. This question is very interesting. What about motor control and communication skills of people, or disabled people, and dementia? Of course, they must have, as we said, basic medication, and peptides can be used as additional or the additional or the complementary method of treatment, they, I think, may be useful in these situations because then can prevent malnutrition, the decreasement of body mass and of muscle mass and of muscle activity because it's additional source of proteins. So they can be useful in this situation. But if you they can be useful at the early stages of their malnutrition or at all stages of muscle or body loss. If you have malnutrition as a disease, as a syndrome, you can use proteins according to the recommendation of physicians. It can be different special remedies, special packages, as we say, sipping nutrition, or even not sipping, also nutrition with the help of parenteral introduction of proteins. So the usage of proteins and peptides is good at the early stages to prevent malnutrition and to supply organism with proteins. On the stage of malnutrition, you must consult your patients with a physician, with a specialist, and I think that peptides they are not be. It will be necessary to give another methods of treatment, for example, such as sipping nutrition. As for problems of tendons, you see, it's a really large problem of rehabilitation medicine because the level of circulation of blood in tendons usually are very low, even in the stage of healthy. When you have healthy person, it is really very difficult. It's low blood circulation. That's why peptides. I don't think that they can stimulate blood circulation very high, but nevertheless, they can be useful for two positions. The first position, they can increase motivation for physical training, motivation to use some procedures, to use some operations, and so on. And it's the first position. And the second position, peptides can increase the activity of fibroblasts. And fibroblasts are the special cells which are the part of tendons. That's why hypothetically peptides can increase the process of healing of tendons. But I should say that tendons, I worked as a specialist of rehabilitation medicine, as a rehabilitologist. And I should say that the way of rehabilitation of sportsmen and not of sportsmen, even of common people with the damage of tendons is very long, is very difficult. And of course, all methods are good in this situation. And people often ask us, doctor, give me something more. And of course, you can recommend peptides because theoretically, hypothetically, they can increase the fibroblast activity and in some degree increase the level of healing of tendons. This is my answer. Thank you. Can modern day DNA test help us prevent dementia or guide us on what treatment we can use to these people? This question is very interesting and is very important. It can, you see, I told you that brain is very complex organ, and which achieve information from different sources, from hearance, from taste, from emotions, and also from movement. And now there are many scientific studies which gives us information that a person who move not so good, they feel the deficit of information which goes to our brain. That's why, and how can we measure the limitation of movement? We can measure by the grip strength, the measurement of grip strength. So when we define by dynamometer the decreasement of muscle strength, we have the sign of the decreasing of muscle activity, and it now it is the risk factor of dementia. What can we do? We can increase, we can define the reason why this person have dynapenia, and we can improve level of movement by special group of physical training, of exercises. We can improve nutrition. We can give to this person supplements, including peptides. And of course, we must measure cognitive functions. We can make some tests such as mini-COG test or MMSE test, and to define in time the decreasement of cognitive activity and the decreasement of cognitive trajectory. So, of course, but to prevent dementia, you see, it is in elders, even there is a special syndrome which is called physio-cognitive syndrome. It's the summarizing of decreasement in movement and decreasement in cognitive activity. And to prevent, to move, as I told, to see, to increase nutrition, to prevent obesity, to measure blood pressure. I told you about this. But this question is really interesting. Thank you very much. Maybe some other questions? Dear friends, maybe some other questions. I see that there are only two. But it's a great pleasure to me to see that we have very Harley. It's a great pleasure to me to see that we have really good education people in our course, because the level of this question is very high, and I see that we are on the right way, because we have very good and good educated auditorium.
Yes, and they will have the opportunity to watch over the presentation, and if they have any questions, they can write it to our email, and I will forward it to you, and I will send them the answer.
Okay, yeah, okay. I will be here tomorrow.
Yes, in 6 o'clock. Yes, and I remind them right now that you have already sent them the link for tomorrow.
Yeah, link for tomorrow, and in Sunday I will be present too. It will be lecture from another speaker, but nevertheless I will be here. And in the end of lecture, of webinar, I will be present as you in the picture, and maybe somebody.
Yes, and Fotis will also be able to say a few words.
Yeah, okay.
Yes. He has a heavy schedule, that's why he didn't make it. Yes.
Okay.
So maybe tomorrow or Sunday he will say a few words definitely.
Perfect, very good. So I think that questions are absent, or
Okay.
some questions? No. So
No.
good.
Okay, perfect. So Andrei, thank you so much. Thank you all.
Thank you.
And see you tomorrow afternoon.
Yeah, see you. Have a lovely evening. Goodbye.
Bye bye. Thank you so
Bye.
much.